Hello, and welcome to this evening's journey through time. Tonight, we'll unfold another page of history and listen closely to the voices it left behind. Maybe you're lying in bed, phone screen dimmed, or maybe you've simply chosen to let the past keep you company for a while. Where are you joining me from tonight? Leave a comment if you'd like. I always enjoy hearing about your corner of the world and what time it is for you. If you find comfort in slow, thoughtful stories about the people who came before us, I'd be honored if you subscribed. If you find yourself drawn to these explorations of humanity's hidden chapters, consider subscribing so you never miss our ventures into the forgotten realms of history. Now, make yourself comfortable as we descend into a world where healing and horror walked hand in hand, where the line between medicine and torture blurred like morning mist, and where the very act of seeking a cure could seal your fate. Picture, if you will, a world shrouded in superstition and ignorance, where the human body remained a mystery wrapped in religious taboo and ancient misconception. This was medieval Europe, an era spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th centuries, where medicine existed in a realm between primitive ritual and scholarly theory, yet remained woefully divorced from what we would recognize as scientific practice. The medieval physician cut a distinctive figure as he made his rounds through cobblestone streets and manor halls. Clad in his distinctive long robes, often black or deep blue, he carried an air of learned authority that commanded both respect and fear. Upon his head sat a peculiar pointed cap, and around his neck hung various amulets and charms believed to ward off the very diseases he sought to treat. Most striking of all was his leather beak-like mask during times of plague, stuffed with aromatic herbs and spices, giving him the appearance of some otherworldly creature stepped forth from the realm of nightmares. Yet for all his imposing presence, the medieval doctor's understanding of the human body was fundamentally flawed, built upon a foundation of ancient theories that had remained largely unchanged for over 1,000 years. The dominant medical theory of the age was that of the four humours, a system inherited from the ancient Greek physician Galen, whose works had been translated and preserved by Islamic scholars before making their way back to medieval Europe. According to this theory, the human body contained four vital fluids or humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humour was associated with specific qualities, temperatures, and even personality traits. Blood was considered hot and moist, linked to a sanguine temperament characterized by optimism and passion. Phlegm was cold and moist, associated with a phlegmatic nature marked by calmness and sluggishness. Yellow bile was hot and dry, connected to a choleric disposition of anger and irritability. Black bile was cold and dry, tied to a melancholic temperament of sadness and introspection. Health, according to this system, depended entirely upon maintaining the proper balance of these four humours within the body. Disease was simply the result of an imbalance, an excess or deficiency of one or more humours that disrupted the body's natural harmony. This seemingly logical explanation for illness would dominate medical thinking for centuries, leading to treatments that were not only ineffective, but often more dangerous than the diseases they purported to cure. The most common and devastating of these treatments was bloodletting, a practice that would claim countless lives throughout the medieval period. Physicians believed that many illnesses resulted from an excess of blood in the body, creating a state of imbalance that could only be corrected by removing the surplus fluid. The methods employed for this grisly procedure varied, but all shared a common disregard for what we now understand about the vital role blood plays in maintaining life. The most straightforward approach involved making incisions in the patient's arms or legs with a sharp knife, allowing blood to flow freely into waiting bowls. Physicians would carefully monitor the amount of blood collected, sometimes removing quantities that would leave modern medical professionals aghast. It was not uncommon for a single bloodletting session to drain a pint or more of blood from an already weakened patient, often pushing them closer to death rather than recovery. For those who could afford more sophisticated treatment, Physicians employed an array of specialized instruments designed to make the bloodletting process more precise. Sharp lancets with gleaming blades could create clean incisions, while spring-loaded devices called fleams could make multiple cuts simultaneously. The wealthy might even request the use of golden or silver instruments, believing that the noble metals would somehow purify the blood as it flowed. But perhaps the most unsettling method of bloodletting involved the use of living creatures as medical instruments. Leeches, those segmented aquatic worms with an insatiable appetite for blood, became the physician's allies in the war against humoral imbalance. These slimy creatures were collected from ponds and streams, then carefully applied to the patient's skin where they would attach themselves and begin their ghastly feast. The sight of a patient covered in writhing leeches, their bodies slowly swelling with stolen blood, must have been deeply disturbing to witness. Yet physicians praised this method for its supposed precision, claiming that leeches would instinctively know exactly how much blood to remove. In reality, these creatures simply fed until they were satiated, with no regard for the patient's well-being or survival. Even more bizarre was the practice of using heated glass cups to draw blood to the surface of the skin through suction. These cupping procedures involved lighting a candle or piece of burning material inside a glass vessel, then quickly placing the cup over the patient's skin as the flame consumed the oxygen and created a vacuum. The resulting suction would draw the skin upward into the cup, supposedly pulling corrupted humors to the surface, where they could be more easily accessed and removed. The circular marks left by cupping were considered signs of successful treatment, dark bruises that proved the physician's skill in drawing out the patient's illness. In reality, these marks were simply evidence of burst blood vessels and damaged tissue, adding injury to an already suffering body. Beyond bloodletting, medieval physicians employed an arsenal of equally disturbing treatments based on their flawed understanding of human anatomy and disease. Purging, the violent expulsion of stomach contents through induced vomiting, was considered essential for removing corrupted humors from the digestive system. Patients were forced to consume nauseating concoctions designed to trigger the most violent possible reaction, leaving them weakened and dehydrated from the ordeal. The substances used to induce vomiting were often as dangerous as the diseases they purported to treat. Mercury, a toxic heavy metal that we now know causes severe neurological damage, was commonly administered in various forms. Patients who survived the immediate effects of mercury poisoning often suffered from tremors, memory loss, and behavioral changes that were mistakenly attributed to their original illness, rather than the treatment itself. Antimony, another poisonous substance, was favored for its reliable ability to cause violent purging. This metallic element was sometimes fashioned into cups, from which patients were required to drink wine, allowing the toxic metal to leach into the liquid and ensure a thorough cleansing of the digestive system. The fact that many patients died from such treatments was often explained away as evidence that their humoral imbalance had been too severe to correct. Perhaps most disturbing of all was the medieval practice of trepanation, the surgical removal of portions of the skull to treat various ailments. This ancient procedure, which had been performed by various cultures for thousands of years, reached new heights of brutality in medieval Europe. Physicians believed that many mental and physical ailments resulted from trapped vapors or corrupted humors within the skull, conditions that could only be relieved by creating an opening to allow the harmful substances to escape. The tools used for trepanation were crude by any standard, resembling instruments of torture more than medical devices. Hand-cranked drills with rough metal bits would slowly bore through the skull bone while the patient remained conscious, as effective anesthesia did not exist. The grinding sound of metal against bone, combined with the patient's screams of agony, must have created a scene from the deepest nightmares. Some physicians preferred to use a technique called scraping, which involved using a rough metal instrument to gradually wear away portions of the skull until a hole was created. This method was considered more controlled than drilling, but it prolonged the patient's suffering considerably as the procedure could take hours to complete. The circular pieces of bone removed during trepanation were sometimes kept as medical specimens or even fashioned into amulets believed to possess healing properties. These grisly souvenirs served as reminders of the physician's skill and the patient's suffering, though they provided no actual medical benefit to anyone. Survival rates for trepanation were abysmal, with most patients dying either during the procedure or from subsequent infections. Those fortunate enough to survive often suffered from permanent brain damage, seizures, or other neurological complications that left them worse off than before the surgery. Yet physicians continued to recommend and perform trepanation throughout the medieval period, convinced that their theoretical understanding of humoral medicine justified even the most extreme interventions. The medieval physician's arsenal also included a bewildering array of substances that ranged from the merely ineffective to the actively poisonous. Crushed pearls were administered to wealthy patients as a cure for various ailments, based on the belief that their luminous beauty contained healing properties. The astronomical cost of such treatments meant that only the nobility could afford them, creating a system where the wealthy received the most exotic and supposedly powerful medicines. Powdered unicorn horn, actually the tusk of a narwhal whale, was among the most prized and expensive medicines available.